Hi everyone, I'm Jesse at Strobepro.com, and today I'm going to be showing you the Strobepro power lifting shaft set. Traditionally, if you wanted to take a roll of paper in your studio and have it mounted on a power set, you would have to buy an expensive roller system. You'd have to take a ton of time to install it, and when you did install it, it'd be fixed permanently there. You couldn't take it down or move it around. Well, with the Strobepro power lifting set, we've made that a lot easier to handle for you. You can put this on a set of stands. You can still mount it to the wall if you want, or if you even want to take it on location, you can do that. It allows you to mount 3 rolls of paper and control them each individually, making it way easier to move them up or down. So let's take a closer look what this set is all about. I've unboxed everything in the Strobepro power lifting shaft set, and we're just going to take a look at all the different components. So right here we have our set of brackets. Obviously you're going to get 2 of these, and one of the nice things about these might look familiar if you have our handheld lifting shaft set. This will take 3 rolls on it, but you'll see this little piece here, and this is going to allow us to mount to a stand if we want. So we can, we're going to take a look at that later, but it would mount that way on a stand. We also still have the holes here, so you can mount this directly to the wall, or you can actually mount it to the ceiling as well. So one side is just going to be bare like that. The other side here has the control box. So this is where we're going to connect the motors to, and it does the controlling, where we're going to plug our power supply into this as well. And yeah, pretty basic. If you ever needed to take that off, we have thumb screws there that can be removed, or if you had to slide it out of the way a little bit, you do have that option as well. As I mentioned, the power cords, we have just a little transformer here, and then the plug that's going to go into the wall. Here's the main part. These are our motors. So this whole component right here is the actual motor part of it, and here's the cable which will plug into the controller a little bit later. And then this is the lifting shaft part of it. So this is what's going to go into the core of the paper. We're going to spin that, and it's going to expand and then lock that roll in. And then once we have the controller, we would be able to operate it up and down. And these guys just drop into the slots on there. So we have 3 of those guys, and then we have the other side of those as well. These are not motorized. These are just going to go into the other side of the paper, and we can adjust that, and I'll show you how to align that properly in a minute. I should mention you do get a set of wall anchors in here, so if you do have like a commercial space or something, you're going into a cinder block wall, these are concrete anchors. If this is just going in your home or your basement, you're probably just going to be using standard wood screws, and we have 4 holes in there, so that will hold that no problem. The last thing we have here is our controller, and you will have 2 batteries in there as well that are included, and that's going to allow us to bring that up and down as we need. So those are all the parts that we have. Let's actually put this thing together right now. I'm going to show you how to stand mount the lifting shaft set right now. And just a quick mention about stands. I have 2 10-foot air cushion stands here. You don't really want to use anything less than that. Now, this shaft set is capable of taking 3 rolls of paper. That could be 4.5, 7, or 9-foot rolls of paper. We do not recommend using 12 foots. They're just too heavy. So any of your standard sizes are fine. You just want to have a stand that's adequate to handle that weight, a nice wide base so you're not going to tip it over. And if you are at a place where this could possibly fall onto someone, make sure you're using sandbags just to avoid any issues that could arise. Now, when you put your stands out, what you want to make sure is that the bottom of this leg is facing toward each other. So this one's coming this way and this one's coming this way. That's going to avoid the paper hitting a leg. So if you point them out like that, when the paper unrolls, it's going to hit the leg, and then you can't get that nice seamless look that you're trying to achieve. So you can use standard 10-foot stands like this. You could use C-stands. Really any stand with a standard spigot or even a baby pin is going to work. So let's put the brackets on the stands right now. Okay, we're going to stand mount this, but you do have the option, like I said before, if you wanted to wall mount this, you would just go here if you want to go vertical, or if you want to go onto the ceiling, if you have a ceiling that will support the weight, you can either go this way or you can go this way. Just pay attention that this screw might get in the way, so normally we like to have that on the outside. All you do, back off that screw, drop it onto your spigot, and you're good to go. Now, one thing you're going to notice here is that this middle bracket is really close to the stand. So what we need to do is we need to mount our motor and the other side of the lifting shaft on that middle bracket if we're going to be using it. So if you only have 1 or 2 rolls, I'd suggest using the front and the back, because this middle one's just a little bit more work because the stand is a little bit in the way here. But on the other side here, just make sure that the control box is on the inside. So if you're looking at it right now, that would be on your left. You can put it on the other side if you want, but just be aware this might get into the way of your stand. So let's take the motor and put that on right now. Okay, we have one of our motors, and all 3 of the motors are the same, so you don't have to worry about which one goes where. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is where we plug it in. So if you see on the bottom right here, this piece is rounded. So we have a squared off piece right here, and then a rounded piece right here. And that rounded piece is going to match to the round insert of the bracket here. So we need to make sure that these motors are on the outside. If we have them on the inside, they would obviously be in the way. So all we're going to be doing is just going to that, sliding or lining it up, and then sliding it in, and then the motors will sit vertical like that. And then we're going to take this and plug it in, which I'll talk about in a second. Now, I mentioned that middle bracket. It's a little bit of a nuisance when you're using it stand mounted. If you're using it on the wall or in the ceiling, this isn't even an issue, so you can just ignore this. But what we actually have to do for this one is install that motor first. So I'm just going to pull that off, take this motor off here and slide it in, and just make sure, line that up, it'll drop in, and then we can drop this back on. And it's a little bit of a nuisance there, but just because of the clearance of the vertical stand there, we have to install that first. Now we can take the rest of the motors and add them to the bracket. I should also mention that you'll see that I've raised up the top collar of the stand. We just need a bit of clearance on that, so you can see that I've raise that up. If I had it all the way down, I'd be hitting that screw with the motor. So you just need to bring up like 8 inches on your top section there. And from there, then you would raise the other sections to add the actual height to the stand. So just give yourself, that much room there just for the motor to clear. Let's drop the other motors in. Again, just lining up that round piece on the front there. Making sure you don't pinch the cable. You don't want to damage that. We can just go on this side, slide it in, and now we have all of our motors mounted. Now let's plug these into the control box. Now we need to plug our cables in, and what you don't want to do is go around the front and have this like drape over the shaft here, because this is what's going to spin, and if you do that, it's going to coil up that cable really quick and destroy it. So just make sure that you're going around the back here so we're not going to interfere with anything. You're going to see on here we have numbers labeled 1 to 6. We're just going to be using number 1, 2, and 3. This is the same control that we can use for a 6 shaft set, but we're not currently carrying that one. So all I'm going to do is go to number 1, plug that in, find my other one here. Same thing, go into number 2, and then the last one into number 3. And just being careful, I haven't tangled anything. What you can even do, if this is going to be fixed for a while, you could just take a piece of gaff tape and just gaff them here just to make sure that you're not going to catch anything. But as long as they're not draped over the lifting shaft there, then they're going to be fine. From there, you're going to see we have one other port over here, and that's where we're going to connect our actual power. So let's do that right now. We have two pieces to our power adapter. We have the box and the cable. I'm just going to plug the one end of the cable into the box here. And then the other end is just going to go into the wall. So that'll go to the wall, but what I'm going to do first is plug this in. I'm just going to go into the same kind of area that I plugged the other cables in. And we're going just into that first hole there. Now you don't want this cable just to be hanging on this outlet. If you do that, you're going to damage it. There's too much weight. So this either needs to be on the ground or tape this box onto your stand with a roll of gaff tape. But for us, we've got enough just to stretch it down to the ground. So I'll undo that, and then we've got enough cable. You could run an extension cord if you were going really high and you had to reach somewhere, and then just plug into the wall. Before we install our first roll of paper, we want to just make sure that this is actually powered up and functioning properly. You don't want to be dealing with a big 9-foot roll of paper and have issues. So take your remote, there's a little battery, there's actually 2 included, it only takes 1, so you do have a spare. And yes, I know this looks like a 1990 remote, it's very basic, but its function is very basic too. It does have an antenna, so I mean, it is not a phone, but you can use that antenna if you're really far away. Otherwise, you don't need to use that. I know it's ridiculous. We will eventually probably change that, but we're just trying to keep the cost down. It's a basic remote to do a basic function. So on the remote, you're going to see 6 buttons, and we've used port 1, 2, and 3. And the way that this works is one side is up and then one side is down. So for number 1, actually plugged in, it would use 1 and 2. The second one would use 3 and 4, and the last one would use 5 and 6. So just to make sure, okay, 1's working, up, down, perfect, and we can see. Now you might notice right away, like that doesn't look like it's running straight. There's some flex in there, and that's by design. The reason is because if your roll of paper is rigid and say the core is warped, if this is rigid too, then you're just going to get a huge wobble in it, and it's just going to accentuate that if this was fixed. So there's a little bit of play in there to compensate for the roll of paper, because none of them are going to stay straight forever. As soon as you start mounting a roll of paper horizontally, you will get some sag in it. If you want to counteract that effect, you can purchase our aluminum cores. Those are just aluminum cores, like the name suggests, that go inside your paper core. And what that does is it prevents sagging. So that is an option that you could pick up if you wanted to prevent that and make your paper last as long as possible. But from here, we know our motors are working, we're good to go. So now we can mount the paper and get the other side of the lifting shaft installed. One of the most annoying things dealing with lifting shaft sets is that they have the tendency to unspool the paper. The weight of the paper gets going, and then the whole roll just wants to unspool, and it can be really frustrating. With this, you don't have to worry about that, and that's really one of the big advantages of the power lifting shaft set, is that this is locked in. The only way that that is going to unspool the paper is if you take the remote and unspool it. So you don't have to worry just leaving it there, that you come back in an hour to your set and the whole roll is just unspooled. No more clamps at the top of your roll, clamping it on and possibly damaging paper. So that's just another benefit of using this system. Just a quick note about the position of the motors when you're mounting this in either on the wall or on a stand or on the ceiling. If we're mounting it on the stand, you can see that the motors are vertical here. If we were doing it on the ceiling, same thing. You're just going to screw that into the ceiling and everything stays in the same position. But just be aware, if you take this and you're installing it, that on the wall or on an auto pull, the motors are actually going to go horizontal and face out. Nothing's really changed other than just the position of the entire bracket. Now, one thing I do want to mention, that if you are putting this on the wall and you're trying to screw this in, we have our 2 screws on the top here, which are exposed. That's great. And then we have our 2 on the bottom. But the control box, so this guy right here, is actually blocking this screw. So if you see over here, we have 2 thumb screws. We can just loosen those off. That's going to take off the control box. allow us to mount the bracket so it exposes that screw, we can drill it in, and then put the control box back onto the actual bracket. So just a couple pointers there, just don't worry, nothing's actually changed. We're either just going horizontal with the motors or vertical if you're using them on the stand or on the ceiling. Okay guys, I've grabbed a 4.5 foot roll of Savage paper here. Whether you're using 4.5, 7, or 9 foot, they're all going to have the same core in them. Now before we mount this, we want to make sure that we are going to assemble this with the paper facing down. So if I just look at the corner here, this is down. We don't want to have this the other way so the paper is spooling over top of itself. That would be backwards. So make sure it's this way, and we'll be good to go. So the basic function of the lifting shaft on both sides is for this to go inside and then expand. So it might take a second because it's new, but essentially if I hold that, what's happening is this is tightening and it's expanding this piece right here. So you can see if I just push it with my thumb, as I turn that, that expands inside the core and then locks the core so that the motor will turn it. So we're just going to save a bit of time by doing this outside of the core. Once I get it kind of started, I'm going to drop that in, and I'm again just making sure, yeah, I'm on the right side. And I'm going to spin this for however long it takes until that expands. So, okay, there it's starting to go. And once you get it kind of tight, you can kind of take a look and see. What I don't want to happen is have this thing go way inside there like that. That is not going to work for you. You have an end here, and so the end, you kind of see this beige piece here, and then we have like a stopper on it. So you don't want that to go any farther than the end of the core. And so then we'll just tighten from there, and you don't have to over tighten this, just make sure it's snug, and then it's not going to spin. This piece here, we can just loosen this off. This is what's going to mount onto the other side, and we want that to be able to spin so we can adjust that. From here, I just need to set the width of my stands, and I can kind of gauge that if I kind of hold this one up here, and then I can adjust this stand as necessary. So I'll set the width here and we'll get this installed. All right, we have this side mounted. We're ready to put it on the motor side. One thing I want to mention is you want to do your best to kind of get the width and the actual height relatively the same. If you're off by an inch or something, you can adjust it, but what we don't want is one way higher than the other. It's just more difficult to set it up. The other thing that I should mention is that I'm doing a 4.5 foot roll by myself, which is easy enough to do. If you're doing anything bigger, like a 7 or a 9, I really suggest just get someone to give you a hand for a second. It's going to be way easier. What you don't want to have is when you're putting these on, if you drop the end or something, you're going to maybe possibly bend the steel in the shaft or something. So just use an extra person. You're not going to be doing this all the time, so it's, you know, a couple extra seconds to grab someone to give you a hand. There are two ways to do this. So as we're doing, we're putting this on with the motor already mounted. Technically, you can do this with the motor attached, just like we did the other side. So if you're going to do that, just be aware you can't do the middle one like that. The middle one always has to be installed this way, but otherwise you could have this already installed and then just drop it in the slot. But for our purposes, all we're going to do is just slide this in. I'm going to expand this just a little bit here so I don't have to sit and turn it for a minute while I'm holding the other end of the paper. Okay, so it takes a second to kind of expand. So I'm going to put that in, and I'm not going to really tighten that. I went a little too far there. I just want it to be kind of in there a little bit loosely, perfect, like that. So on this side, what I'm going to do is grab this little roller piece here, and that's going to just go and slide in. So you see why we use that loose now is because we might need to manipulate that back and forth just a little bit. With that installed, what I need to do is go over here and just make sure that this is not inserted too far in. And now we can tighten that down. You'll feel it expand. Now it's locked into place. I usually like to leave this side loose because if I tighten that down, what happens when I'm using the motor and it's unrolling, if my paper core is warped at all, then it's going to want to bind and kind of jump out of the actual track. So if I leave that loose, it's just got that little bit of play that it could wobble back and forth if it needs to, if your core is at all warped. From there, we would just do our other ones, up to 3 rolls, like I said. But let's take a look and see how this works now. Okay guys, one thing I wanted to mention, I told you before not to let this hang, and that's exactly what I'm doing there. So this is where gaff tape is your best friend. Strobepro, we sell white and black, so pick yourself up a roll. It's really handy, especially when you're dealing with backdrops. You don't want to be using duct tape or something that leaves a residue all over. So when we tape this down to the floor, once we spool it out, gaff tape is definitely what you want to be using. But just so this isn't hanging, all I'm going to do is just grab the cable here and just take a piece of gaff, put it on there. So that just takes the tension off the actual port up top. So with that done, I'm going to grab my remote out, and what I need to do is just get the paper ready. So I've just used some painter's tape on there, and I just want to make sure that that paper is unspooled on that side. So from there, I just take my remote again, and I have the up and down. So I'm on port 1, and I'm just going to unspool it. Once you get it started, that first little roll there is no problem. You can put some weight if you wanted to put a clamp or something on, if you're just doing some headshots, that's no problem. But from there, bring it down. If I want to do a big sweep, I can run some more onto the floor, just like that, and then roll it out and then gaff tape it onto the floor. When I'm done, just bring it back up. Super easy. And again, you're going to be dealing with this little roll here, this first little curl. It's going to curl up until it gets some weight there so that it can bring itself back up. So from there, once I'm at the top, I can pull the tension back out of that just by hand if I want, tape it back down, or you really don't need to. You can just leave it as it is so you're ready to go for the next time and spin it back down. If you don't want to deal with the little roll up that happens on paper, all you need to do is put some weight on it. Savage sells leader bars, which we can also get for you if you want. That's just a bar that goes right across the edge, makes it easier to roll out. But if you want to do a cheap and simple hack, you can pick up some A-clamps at Home Depot or Walmart. They're $5, $6 a piece. And all you need to do is grab 2 of these and put them on either side. So this paper is actually not cut straight here, which usually happens when you're just trying to get it cut off. But I've got one here and one over there. Then I can take my remote, and it's actually a lot easier to unspin. You don't get that big coil. And once it hits the ground, it'll stop there. So you would need to make sure that you're spinning it out, or else the paper is going to bind. But when you bring it back up, it's quite easy. You would just stop there. And obviously I have this down just for in the studio here. This would normally be a lot higher. You could go up to 10 feet or 12 feet, whatever you're doing, depending on the stand. But that's just a quick and easy hack if you don't want to deal with that paper coiling up. So there you have it. That's everything you need to know. That's everything you need. Kevin, give me the remote.
I'm done.
That's everything you need to know about the Strobepro power lifting shaft set. We can mount 3 rolls of paper either on stands, or if you have a studio, mount it on the wall or on the ceiling for a permanent location. This is very affordable. You don't have to spend a ton of money like a traditional motorized system. We have a remote, just bring it up, down, change the rolls as necessary, just turn them out, put a new roll on. It's super easy. So whether you want to go with the power lifting shaft or you still prefer the manual lifting shaft set that we also sell, it's your choice. And until next time, I'm Jesse at strobepro.com, and enjoy creating.